My name is Lorraine Bishop, and the last thing I ever expected was to be blindsided by the one person I raised alone, with love sacrifice and every ounce of strength I had left. I was ready to gift her $50,000 a month, not a penny less. But then I heard what she said when she thought I wasn't listening. You might actually regret missing this dramatic story. So before you sit down and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. I didn't grow up with money. I married young, too young, and was left even younger with a newborn daughter and no one else in the world. My husband had dreams of music and a wandering heart. He left before Sophie could say, Daddy and I never heard from him again. So I did what any mother would do. I rolled up my sleeves, picked up 3 jobs, and built a life around my daughter. I cleaned houses during the day, worked front desk shifts at a motel in the evening, and did bookkeeping from midnight to 3 a.m. for a trucking company that never even knew my name. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to keep the lights on and make sure Sophie had something warm in her lunchbox. By the time she turned 10, I'd managed to scrape together just enough to move us out of the one-bedroom studio in that noisy part of Cleveland and into a modest but clean 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town. I still remember the way she looked at her own room, her small hands running over the peeling flower decals I'd stuck on the wall. You did this for me, Mommy. She never asked again, but the answer was always yes, always for her. Fast forward 25 years. I'm 64 now. Retired technically, though I still consult part-time for a mid-sized accounting firm out of sheer habit. The hustle never quite left me. But something else changed my finances. At first, it was a modest win. A small inheritance from my aunt back in Dayton, which I invested instead of spending. I took online courses on portfolio management in my 50s just out of curiosity. Then I got serious. Stocks, REITs, conservative ETFs, and later options trading once I learned the ropes. Turns out the skill of budgeting down to the last cent translates well into building wealth when you finally have something to budget. And last fall, I crossed the $1 million mark. But I kept it quiet. Even Sophie didn't know. Why? Because I wanted to give but not enable. I knew she and her husband Justin had their struggles. He worked in marketing but had been job hopping. She ran a small boutique, trendy but barely breaking even. I figured I could quietly supplement their income. Not too much to spoil them, just enough to take the pressure off. $50,000 a month. That's what I was planning. That's what I had written down on the draft I kept tucked in my desk drawer. Sophie always joked she was saving for a rainy day. Well, I was ready to bring the umbrella. That is until that Tuesday afternoon. I'd gone to drop off a photo album I'd made for her birthday. She wasn't home yet, but Justin had given me the spare key years ago and insisted I use it any time. So I let myself in, left the album on the coffee table, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat down waiting. The front door opened with a clatter and I heard her heels clicking down the hallway. I'm home, she called. I was about to answer when she picked up her phone and said, Yeah, Mom's here, but she won't be long. I'll just smile, take the album, and act surprised. I froze. $50,000 a month. Please. She doesn't need all that money. She's just sitting on it like some old dragon. If I play this right, I'll get her to hand over the whole nest egg within a year. There was a pause, a laugh. She still thinks I love coming over every week. It's exhausting pretending to care about her dumb stories. But hey, it's paying off. My throat tightened. I didn't even realize I was still holding the teacup until it clinked against the saucer in my lap. I stood quietly and slipped out the back door. My legs moved on instinct, but my heart stayed behind, shattered into 1,000 pieces on her white marble kitchen floor. This wasn't just greed, it was betrayal. And the woman I'd sacrificed everything for was the one rehearsing lies behind my back. But I didn't scream. I didn't confront. Not yet. I had a different plan. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying her voice over and over again in my head, like a broken record. Just smile. Take the album and act surprised. She doesn't need all that money. If I play this right. Each word was a blade. And the deeper I thought about it, the more I realized. This wasn't something she just came up with. This wasn't a one-time comment. This was a strategy long rehearsed, carefully crafted, and deeply rooted. The next morning, I didn't call her. I didn't show up to the birthday dinner she'd planned for me. I didn't even text her a reason why. Instead, I sat down at my desk, pulled out the draft of the financial plan, and shredded it. All $900,000 worth of monthly transfers all gone in one swift motion. I wasn't angry, not in the way you might think. I was hurt, hollow, and worst of all, humiliated. Because the truth is, I wanted to believe I'd raised someone kind, someone good. I spent the next week going through our old pictures from the days when she still had pigtails and scraped knees, when she'd sit in my lap and cry over cartoon characters dying, when she used to slip little love notes under my bedroom door. "You're the best mom ever." Where did that girl go? And what replaced her? I didn't know what I was mourning more, the betrayal itself, or the illusion I'd been living in. Then a few days later, Sophie showed up at my doorstep, all smiles and perfect lipstick. "Mom, you okay? You didn't come to dinner and I got worried." She leaned in for a hug. I stiffened. She didn't notice. "Sorry," I said, my voice cold even to my own ears. "I wasn't feeling well." She clicked her tongue. "Well, next time, at least let me know. I made your favorite lemon pie." That lemon pie must have tasted awfully bitter with betrayal. I invited her in, sat across from her. She rambled on about her business, the rent hike, and how Justin might be between jobs again. I nodded, offering the occasional or I see, all the while scanning her face for any sign of guilt. But there was none. She was good. Too good. As she stood to leave, she turned to me with a half smile. "Oh, by the way, Justin and I were thinking of taking a short trip to Aruba next month. Just a little getaway, recenter ourselves." I raised a brow. "Aruba. That sounds expensive." She laughed. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a quick escape. We've had such a hard year." I forced a smile. "Of course." And as she hugged me goodbye, she whispered, "Love you, Mom." Those words used to be the balm to all my wounds. Now they felt like arsenic wrapped in sugar. As the door clicked shut, I turned back into the living room, suddenly feeling like a guest in my own life. But I wasn't about to let this chapter end with me playing the fool. No, I was going to write a different ending. One where I didn't hand over my hard-earned peace to a daughter who saw me as a bank account with legs. I decided to pay a visit to an old friend, Henry Garland. He'd been my boss years ago, back when I was still managing finances for the Clarkson Group. Henry had long since retired to a quiet life running a nonprofit that helped women start over, especially those who'd spent their lives raising children who forgot how to say thank you. When I walked into his office, his face lit up. "Lorraine, it's been years. Still keeping those numbers in line." I laughed weakly. "Trying to, but now I've got a different kind of math problem." He listened patiently as I told him everything from the overheard phone call to the shredded financial plan. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he leaned back, laced his fingers together, and said, "You want my advice? Always. Don't just disappear. Let her see the ripple." "The ripple?" He nodded. "The impact of losing you. Not your money, but you. Make her feel the absence of your trust, your support, your belief in her. And when she starts to realize what she's lost, then you decide whether she deserves to come back." It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. And I needed that clarity like I needed air. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and began writing a letter. Not to Sophie. Not yet. To myself. I wrote down every sacrifice I'd made. Every time I said no to myself to say yes to her. Every sleepless night, every call from her school, every emergency hospital visit, every tuition check. Then I wrote one last line. If I was enough to give everything for her, I'm enough to take something back for me. The morning after I wrote that letter, I woke up with a strange calm in my chest. Not joy, not relief, just calm. Like the kind that comes after a long storm. A kind of quiet resignation that things would never go back to what they were, and maybe that wasn't such a tragedy after all. I made a cup of tea, sat in the sunroom, and looked out over the garden that I'd planted the year Sophie moved out. Back then, I thought it would be something we tended together. She promised to come every Sunday, remember? She'd said, "I want to keep a piece of us, Mom." But like most of her promises, it faded into convenience. The roses bloomed anyway. That afternoon, I drove to the bank and closed the separate savings account I'd opened just for her monthly support. The teller asked me, "Are you sure?" I smiled and said, "For the first time in years." But it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about drawing a line. Because when love becomes expectation and kindness becomes currency, what's left of a mother's heart? Later that week, Sophie sent a voice message, cheerful, upbeat, sugar-coated. "Hey mom, just checking in. I was wondering if we could go over the new monthly transfer schedule. I know we were talking about bumping it to 60K next quarter, and Justin and I are trying to plan ahead for the next baby." The next baby. I nearly dropped my phone. She hadn't even told me she was pregnant or thinking of becoming pregnant. But apparently, my bank account was already godmother to it. I didn't reply. That evening, I baked a lasagna, the way she used to love it as a girl. Then I packed it up, drove it across town, and left it at her doorstep with a note that said, "For your family, from mine." I rang the bell and walked away. I watched from my car as she opened the door, picked up the dish, and scanned the street confused. That was the last time I gave her something without her asking for it. The silence between us stretched. Days turned to a week, then two. And then came the text message. "Sophie, Mom, are you okay? I feel like you've been distant lately." I stared at the screen for a long time. "Not angry, just tired," I typed back. "I'm okay. Just sorting through a few things." She replied a minute later. "Okay. Just don't forget the apartment lease renews in 2 months. We were hoping you'd help cover the security deposit again. Love you." "No, how are you really?" "No, is something going on?" Just straight to the ask. I started to type back, then stopped. Instead, I opened my calendar, highlighted the second weekend of the month, and booked a small retreat in Maine, a little cabin on the lake. Just me, a few books, and a promise I made to myself in that letter. I owe me. That trip changed something. Every morning, I would walk down to the water, sit barefoot on the dock with a cup of coffee, and watch the mist roll over the lake like some ancient breath whispering, "You're still here." And I'd whisper back, "Yes, I am." I wasn't a mother on that dock. Not someone's bank account. Not a forgotten woman who gave too much. I was Lorraine again. The girl who once dreamed of traveling alone. Who once sang in the kitchen at midnight. Who used to believe that being needed was not the same as being loved. When I got back to the city, my house felt unfamiliar, like a sweater you've outgrown but still keep in the closet for sentiment's sake. And just as I was unpacking, the doorbell rang. It was Sophie. She was standing there, cheeks pink, holding a photo album. "Hi. I brought something?" I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one I'd written my letter on, and she began flipping through the album. Baby photos. Birthday parties. My face in every frame, behind the cake, behind the camera, behind the scenes. "You were always there," she said softly. "Always." I nodded. "Yes. I was." She looked up, hesitating. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Are you mad at me?" I didn't answer right away. I turned the page. A picture of us in Disneyland. She was 7, wearing mouse ears and holding my hand. I think I said slowly I was mad at myself for expecting you to be someone you're not, and for giving so much that I forgot I had a limit. She looked stricken. "I didn't mean to take advantage." "But you did," I said gently. "And maybe it's not all your fault. I taught you to expect it. Every check, every rescue, every sacrifice, I did that. I made that the language of our love." She bit her lip. "So, what now?" I smiled. "Now I learn a new language. One that doesn't require me to disappear in order for you to feel secure." She blinked. "Does that mean you're not going to help us anymore?" I didn't say that. I said I'm going to stop disappearing. If you ever come to me not for money, but for me, you'll find I'm still here. But I'm not funding a life that doesn't include my heart." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in years, so did mine. After Sophie left that evening, something shifted in the air. The house didn't feel lighter. It wasn't that kind of story. But it was still settled, like the wind had finally stopped rattling my windows. I slept through the night for the first time in months. But clarity doesn't mean the hurt disappears. In fact, the next few weeks were a strange cocktail of peace and ache. I would pass by the little ceramic owl on the hallway table, the one Sophie made in 2nd grade, and feel both a quiet smile and a silent sting. Love is like that. It stays even when it's cracked. Sophie didn't text me the next day, or the one after. But by the 3rd, she sent a message. "Sophie, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I'm sorry for everything, for making you feel invisible. I stared at those words, not out of shock but disbelief, because apologies weren't Sophie's language, not since she was a teenager anyway. I replied simply, "Thank you. That means more than you know." She asked if we could meet for coffee on Sunday. No mention of money, no logistics, just coffee. And for the first time in a long while, I said yes without hesitation. We met at a small cafe near her apartment, one with exposed brick and fiddle leaf figs, and a menu too complicated for someone my age to understand without pointing. I wore a deep green scarf that used to be her favorite on me. I didn't expect her to notice, but she did. "Mom." That scarf, she smiled. "You look beautiful." It wasn't grand. It wasn't redemption. But it was something. We talked not about finances or responsibilities or even the past. We talked about her job, her pregnancy. Yes, she confirmed it, and the things she was scared of. And for once, I didn't offer solutions. I just listened. That Sunday became a pattern. Every weekend she'd check in, sometimes for lunch, sometimes just a call. And slowly, without realizing it, we began to rebuild something from the ashes. But just when I thought the worst was behind us, a new ripple surfaced. Justin, her husband. If Sophie was used to asking, Justin was used to expecting. He never questioned where things came from, only why they weren't coming faster. One afternoon, Sophie invited me over for dinner. A sweet gesture, I thought, until I arrived and found Justin waiting at the kitchen island with a manila folder. He smiled. "Lorraine, good to see you. Listen, I've been putting together a little business proposal. Nothing too serious, just an idea we're hoping you might invest in." Sophie froze mid-salad toss. "Justin," she started. No, let me just show her. "You know how smart your mom is with money." He laid out charts, projections, a pitch about eco-friendly home renovations or something equally vague. I didn't hear the words. I was too busy watching Sophie's face drain of color. It wasn't her idea. It wasn't even her plan. This was his way of pressing on the bruise. When he finished, I looked at him and said, "That's quite the pitch. But I'm not looking to invest in anything at the moment." His face twitched. "Oh, well, I mean, it's not really investment, it's more like support." I folded the folder and pushed it gently back to him. "I support people, not pressure." And I turned to Sophie. "Thank you for dinner, darling. It was lovely." As I left, I saw her eyes glisten not with anger, but gratitude. Sometimes saying no is the kindest thing you can do. A few days later, she came by alone. No appointment, no agenda. Just her. She sat on the edge of my porch swing, feet tucked beneath her like she used to as a girl, and said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." I sat beside her. "I've been seeing a therapist," she whispered. I looked at her surprised. "I didn't know how to handle what you said. About the way I made you feel, and about how I saw love. I needed help unpacking that." I reached for her hand. "I'm proud of you," I said. "More than I can say." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You were right. You always were. I didn't lose you because you stopped giving. I almost lost you because I forgot who you were." That night, I pulled out an old journal, one I hadn't written in for years. And I penned the words, "She's trying." I see her now. Not the child I once carried, but the woman she's becoming. And I'm learning to be seen too. But healing doesn't mean the world stops testing you. A week later, I received a letter from a lawyer. Apparently, Justin had filed for a business-related lien against a property I had co-signed on years ago. Without telling me, he'd found a loophole, and he was trying to claim a part of my lake cabin, the one place that had been truly mine. My hands trembled as I read. But this time, I wasn't the woman who cried and caved. I was the woman who'd learned how to draw lines. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I simply folded the letter, walked to my study, and placed it on the desk beside a photo of my late husband. "You'd know what to do, Hank," I whispered. "But I'll figure it out." I'd always handled things. Hospital bills, taxes, repairs on the house. Quietly, efficiently. It's what mothers do. But this felt different. This was war declared behind my back from within my own family. The next morning, I dressed deliberately. A navy pantsuit, low heels, pearl studs Hank gave me on our 20th anniversary. Power wasn't in the outfit. It was in the decision to wear it. I called my lawyer. I need to protect what's mine, I said plainly. After I explained the situation, she let out a soft whistle. He's smart, but he's not smarter than you. Let's talk strategy. I learned that by co-signing that investment cabin years ago, back when I still trusted Justin, I left the door slightly open. Not enough for him to walk through legally, but enough for him to try. Don't respond emotionally, my lawyer warned. Let me handle it. And don't say a word to Sophie yet. Not until we know what we're dealing with. I hung up, and the silence in the house was deafening. My phone buzzed. Sophie. Hey, we're going up to the lake cabin next weekend. Thought you'd like to come? It's been forever. I stared at the message. Was she in on it? Or was she being used again? I typed, maybe? Let me check my schedule. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I went up to the attic. Old boxes, holiday decorations, a few of Hank's old flannels I could never throw out. And there, beneath a blanket, was the safe. Inside it, the original deed to the cabin. Signed, notarized, in my name only. No addendums, no amendments. Just me. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I doubted myself, but because I realized how close I'd come to losing it without ever noticing. Later that week, I met with my lawyer again. She smiled as I handed her the deed. Well, that's going to ruin his morning. She filed paperwork that would legally solidify my sole ownership and flagged Justin's attempt as a potential fraud case. You're in the clear, she assured me. But we're going to keep this quiet for now. That weekend, I went to the cabin. Justin greeted me with forced enthusiasm. Lorraine, so glad you made it. You've been working too hard lately. I looked at him and smiled. Funny, I was just thinking the same about you. Sophie was already inside setting up brunch. The lake shimmered behind her like a painting, and for a moment I allowed myself to enjoy the view. My sanctuary. As we ate, Justin started in. I've been thinking about renovations, he said. Maybe we build out a second floor, turn this place into a real family legacy. I sipped my coffee. That sounds expensive. He chuckled. Well, you know, smart investments pay off in time. I turned to Sophie. What do you think? She hesitated. I want a place our child can grow up in. Something real. I studied her. There was no calculation in her voice. Just hope. That night, while everyone else slept, I walked along the edge of the lake. The moon shimmered on the water, and I let the chill remind me I was alive. Not just existing, not just giving, alive. And that's when I made the decision. The next morning, I asked Sophie to take a walk with me. Justin stayed behind grumbling about spotty Wi-Fi. I need to tell you something, I said, slipping my hands into my coat pockets. About the cabin. About everything. Her face fell. Is it bad? Not for me. Then I told her everything. The lien, the letter, the lawyer, the deed. At first she didn't react. Just listened jaw tight. I didn't know she whispered. I swear, Mom, I didn't know. I believe you, I said. She sat on a log and stared at the water. I married someone who thinks people are tools. I thought I could change that. I thought maybe love would sand down the edges. I sat beside her. I thought the same once, I said. About your father. Until I realized love can't be the only one doing the work. We watched the lake in silence. Then she turned to me. What are you going to do? I looked at her steady. I'm going to protect what's mine. And I'm going to protect you, even if it means protecting you from your husband. She nodded. And for the first time since she was a child, she reached out and held my hand. Not because she needed something, but because she finally saw me. We walked back slowly. There was no confrontation that day. No screaming. No drama. Just a silent understanding that the tides had shifted. And I was no longer the woman they could take for granted. When we returned to the cabin, Justin was outside fiddling with a drone, trying to get an aerial shot of the property. He grinned when he saw us approaching, clearly oblivious to what had just shifted beneath his feet. There you are, he called. We're thinking of adding a deck on the north side. Really open it up. I glanced at Sophie, who barely nodded. Sounds like a plan, I replied smoothly, then walked right past him and into the cabin. Inside, I stood in the living room. My living room, and took it in. Every photo on the walls, every crack in the wooden beams, every mug in the cabinet had a story, a memory, a heartbeat. It wasn't just a cabin. It was the last place Hank and I had built together. Brick by brick, dream by dream. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The air was thick with unspoken tension. I poured myself a cup of tea and stood by the window. Then I heard it murmurs coming from the guest bedroom. Justin's voice low and angry. She's bluffing. Don't fall for it. Then Sophie's barely a whisper. She's not. I saw the paperwork. My grip tightened on the cup. She's not going to hand over the deed, Sophie continued. And honestly, I don't think she should. Justin scoffed. Of course you'd say that. Now that you've turned into her lapdog, you're forgetting whose idea this all was. Silence. I didn't agree to scam my own mother, she finally said firm. You twisted this. You made me believe she didn't care about me. Because she doesn't. She's just a bitter old widow who got lucky in the market and now holds it over everyone. I didn't hear the slap, but I heard the silence that followed it. A slow, raw silence that said more than words ever could. I stepped back into the shadows and returned to my room. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. I didn't break. I planned. The next morning, I packed my bag before sunrise. Justin was still asleep, and Sophie met me at the porch with red eyes and a shaken expression. Will you be okay? I asked her gently. I don't know, she admitted. But I know staying here under his thumb. It's not the life I want. I handed her a manila envelope. This is your future. Clean money. Tied to a trust he can't touch. When you're ready to leave, this will help. She looked stunned. You still trust me? I smiled something small but fierce. I trust the woman I raised. The one I saw yesterday by the lake. Not the girl he convinced you to become. She hugged me. Not tightly but with clarity. And I left. Back at home, I didn't relax. I acted. First, I met with my lawyer to finalize the asset protection around the cabin house and investment portfolio. Second, I updated my will every line, every clause airtight. Third, I sent a certified letter to Justin. It was short. Justin, I am aware of your recent attempt to seize control of my property through deceptive means. I have taken appropriate legal steps to ensure the matter is resolved without further escalation. Your actions have consequences. I suggest you take the time to reflect. Lorraine. He didn't respond directly. But a few days later, Sophie showed up at my door with a suitcase. I'm done, she said. We sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I once taught her to make lemon pie, where she cried after her first breakup, where she once carved her initials into the table. I believed everything he told me, she confessed. He said you thought I was weak, that you only gave because you pitied me. I gave, I replied, because I knew what it felt like to be alone and unsure, and because I believed one day you'd come back to yourself. I have, she said, but I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not offering it. Yet I told her. But I am offering space to rebuild. Over the next few weeks, she found her footing, applied for a job, went to therapy, and started planning for a life of her own. Meanwhile, Justin's silence stretched like a void. Until one day a letter arrived. Handwritten. Lorraine, I underestimated you. You win. G. I tore it in half without a second glance. One afternoon, I found Sophie sitting on the porch reading a novel. The sunlight caught her hair, and for the first time in years, she looked peaceful. Do you ever wish things had turned out differently? She asked. No, I said without hesitation. Because if they had, I might still be giving everything to people who didn't value anything. She nodded slowly, and then quietly. I want to earn your trust again. You already started. That night, we baked lemon pie. The scent of lemon and butter lingered in the kitchen. The next morning, remnants of the pie we shared in silence. A silence that for once wasn't heavy. It was reflective, healing. Sophie had begun waking up earlier, helping with the garden, even taking care of the bills without being asked. She didn't move with the sheepishness of guilt anymore. She moved with purpose. I'd started sleeping through the night again. But just when I thought the dust had settled, the storm decided to swing back around. It came in the form of a phone call. Blocked number? I almost didn't answer. But some old part of me picked up anyway. Lorraine. It was Justin. His voice clipped and cold. That same cold that used to freeze my spine when he was younger, when I'd realized he had a way of lying while smiling. I heard Sophie's with you. She ran off with the trust, didn't she? Figures. I always knew she'd sell me out. I didn't respond. I want my cut, he said, his voice hardening. She owes me for everything. For what? I asked. Manipulating her. Convincing her to scam me. Which part exactly are you expecting payment for? You wouldn't understand, he snapped. You always saw me as a disappointment. That's why you never offered me the same things you gave her. And there it was. The root of it. He didn't want the money. He wanted revenge. You made your choices, Justin, I said, calm and clear. And now you live with them. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, but I doubt it. I hung up. Sophie was standing in the hallway, pale. I didn't tell him where I was, she said quickly. I promise. I know, I reassured her. He's just grasping. People like that only shout louder when the walls start closing in. Still, it rattled her. And that night, she tossed and turned on the couch, eventually crawling into my room with her pillow like she used to when she was little. Can I stay with you for a bit? Of course, I said, scooting over. And just like that, we were two girls in a queen bed. One, older, one, younger, both bruised by the same man. In the morning, I called my lawyer again. I want to freeze everything linked to Justin, I said. He's not a direct beneficiary anymore, the lawyer said. You already removed him. I know. But just double-check every account, every document. I want no backdoor access. No technicalities, he agreed. That week, I hired a private investigator not to spy on Justin, but to prepare for what I sensed was coming. And sure enough, it did. Justin filed a claim stating that I was mentally unfit to manage my finances and property. He cited erratic behavior, emotional instability, and claimed that Sophie had coerced me into changing my will. It was laughable, until it wasn't, because he'd filed in a jurisdiction where the courts didn't know me, where the default assumption leaned toward protecting the concerned family member. We need to counter with documentation, my lawyer told me. Medical reports, testimonies. You'll need to show up for an evaluation. It felt like being pulled back into a nightmare, but I complied. I met with psychologists, doctors, even a financial counselor. And at each appointment, I stood with the full force of my dignity, clarity, and age-earned wisdom. This isn't about mental health, I told one evaluator. This is about control. My son lost access to my accounts, and now he wants to paint me as a delusional old woman. I'm not delusional. I'm just done being exploited. When I received the final report, it read, subject displays no signs of cognitive decline or psychological impairment. Fully competent in managing her estate and personal affairs. I almost framed it. The court dismissed Justin's claim as frivolous and lacking merit. But I didn't celebrate. I mourned. Because now it was official. My son had tried to erase me in a court of law. That evening, Sophie and I sat on the back porch again. The sky was painted with pink streaks, the kind that only show up after a storm. I can't believe he tried that, she whispered. I said. Because when someone can't control you, they'll try to convince others you need to be controlled. She nodded, then looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Admiration. Not the kind you give to a parent out of obligation. The kind you give to a woman who survived something you barely understand. Later that night, she told me she wanted to change her name. Not legally yet, but symbolically. I don't want to carry his last name anymore, she said. It doesn't feel like mine. What do you want to be called? She hesitated, then smiled. Maybe. Sophie Arden. Arden. My maiden name. I nodded. It suits you. In the weeks that followed, she started introducing herself that way to new contacts on job applications, even on social media. It was like watching her peel off an old skin and step into something cleaner, sharper, truer. And somewhere along the line, she started calling me, not just Mom, but Lorraine, when we were joking around. It made me laugh every time. She was back, different, stronger, but back, and that was more than I dared to hope for. The following days passed in a strange, comforting calm, a calm that felt earned, not accidental. Sophie and I fell into a rhythm. I'd wake up early, tend to the roses, make coffee. She'd join me around 8, still in pajamas, her hair a mess, but her eyes clear. The hush of peace made room for deeper conversations. About Justin, about her childhood, about the parts of our relationship that neither of us had dared to name before. Do you ever wonder, she asked one morning, what would have happened if Dad hadn't died? I stared into my coffee for a long beat. Yes, but not in the way you'd think. How so? If he were still here, Justin wouldn't have become what he did. Your father wasn't perfect, but he knew how to love with presence. Justin, he started drifting the day your dad's casket hit the earth. I remember she said, it was like the light left his eyes. And mine, I admitted. We didn't say anything more, but the silence was full. That day, Sophie came to me with a question. I want to pay Justin back. My brows furrowed. What do you mean? All the money he took from you because of me, the accounts, the trust, the schemes. I want to give it back. Not to him. To you, Sophie. No, listen, she said, her voice steady. I know you don't need it. That's not the point. I need it. I need to clear the debt for myself. I want to know I did the right thing. I could have argued, told her love isn't transactional. But I saw the steel in her eyes, the kind that only comes from reclaiming your narrative. So I nodded. All right. She started working full-time again, freelance branding for small women-owned businesses. And I'd never seen her more alive. She set up an automatic transfer, $1,000 a month directly into a side account I created just for her. I didn't plan to spend a dime, but I also wouldn't stop her. Because this wasn't about the money, it was about sovereignty. Still, the ripples of Justin's final ploy hadn't fully settled. A few weeks later, I got another letter. This one not from a lawyer, but a journalist. Apparently, Justin had spoken to the press. He'd painted himself as the estranged son of a reclusive heiress, accusing me of falling under the manipulative control of my daughter, who was recently returned after a suspicious absence. The article stopped short of libel, but danced along the edge. They requested a quote. I ignored it. But Sophie didn't. She asked if she could respond not publicly but personally. She sent Justin a letter. Not hateful, not angry, but clear. You tried to reduce my mother to a crazy woman because she no longer served your wallet. You tried to erase me because I saw you for who you are. We're done. And we are not afraid of you anymore. We never heard back. Instead, we heard from people who had read the article, neighbors, old friends, even strangers online. And the consensus wasn't what Justin expected. It was support. One woman wrote, I took care of my mother for 8 years before she passed. My brother lived in Bali the whole time and sued me for the house. Thank you for standing up to your son. Another said, you're not alone. Financial abuse by adult children is more common than people think. Stay strong. And it hit me. Our story wasn't just personal. It was universal. So Sophie had an idea. Let's create something. A platform, a blog, a podcast, anything. A space where women like you, like us, can speak without shame. At first I hesitated. I wasn't tech savvy. I didn't even like talking about myself that much. But then I remembered how many nights I'd cried in silence thinking I was the only one. So I said yes. We called it Her Ledger. Tagline, reclaim the narrative, rewrite the will. And we began posting, small at first, stories, articles, resources. Then podcasts. Sophie would record my voice and edit the episodes. People started listening, really listening. And then something miraculous happened. We got an email from a woman named Annette72 in Arizona. She'd listened to all 10 episodes. She'd shared her story about how her daughter-in-law forced her to live in a garage. She asked for advice. Sophie and I called her. And 3 weeks later, she moved into her sister's home across the country. She'd found the courage to leave. That night, Sophie and I sat outside under the stars. We didn't say much. We just held hands. Later, I found a sticky note on my nightstand. In Sophie's handwriting, it said, Mom, thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on you. It made me cry, not tears of sadness, tears of recognition. The growth of her ledger was quiet but steady, just like the strength it honored. Every week, Sophie and I released a new episode. Some featured me reading anonymous letters from women across the country. Others were interviews with experts on elder abuse, financial manipulation, and grief. Occasionally, we'd post open letters, raw, unfiltered reflections on motherhood betrayal and reclamation. What I hadn't anticipated was how healing it would be. Not just for our listeners, but for me. Telling my story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about recognition. about standing in the wreckage and saying, yes, this happened. And I'm still here. Still, my mind often returned to Justin not out of bitterness, but curiosity. How did someone I raised, someone I held as a baby, become so sharp-edged? One morning, I walked into my office and found a manila envelope on my desk. It was from one of our listeners. Inside was a newspaper clipping Justin's face smiling at a gala event. The headline read, Justin Whitman spearheads real estate tech venture with international backing. Below the headline was a quote from him. Family is complicated. Sometimes you have to cut ties to protect your peace. Sophie read over my shoulder. Protect his peace. That's rich. But I didn't feel anger. Just distance. Like watching a familiar movie in a different language. I knew the shape of the story, but the words no longer pierced. I tucked the article into a drawer I barely used. I was done letting him live rent-free in my spirit. That weekend, Sophie and I hosted a community circle at our home. 10 women ranging in age from 50 to 80 came to share their stories. One had lost her home to a conniving grandson. Another had been manipulated into signing over her life insurance. They laughed, they cried, they hugged. One woman, Florence, 78, told us, "It's the first time in 10 years I've spoken about it without shame. I felt something shift in me. Maybe this was my legacy, not the silent wealth I'd accumulated, but the loud love I was now capable of giving." After the gathering, Sophie approached me a little hesitant. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking about the money." I raised an eyebrow. "I want to stop sending the monthly deposit. You don't have to keep—" "No, listen," she said gently. "I've put $12,000 into that account, and I want to take it back." She rushed to add, "Not for me, for us. I want to use it to build something bigger. Real branding, podcast production, even community grants for women trying to escape abusive financial situations." I smiled. "You don't need my permission." Her eyes watered. "I think I just wanted your blessing." She had it. That night, we stayed up drafting a mission statement. Sophie sketched ideas for a logo. I jotted story angles. It felt like a second act, not just for me, but for both of us. Around midnight, as we were packing up, Sophie paused. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "if Justin will ever come back?" "Not really," I said. "But if he did." I looked at her, and I didn't need to think. I'd listen, but I wouldn't bend. Sophie nodded. Good, because she knew. Deep down, she needed to hear it from me, not just for herself, but as my daughter. As someone who had seen me broken and now saw me whole. Weeks passed. Her ledger crossed 100,000 downloads. We received an email from NPR, then one from a publisher. Sophie began teaching workshops. I began receiving speaking invites. One in particular stood out. A women's conference in D.C., focusing on intergenerational wealth abuse and empowerment. They wanted me to keynote. I said yes. Standing on that stage under bright lights staring at 500 faces, I opened with the only words that made sense. "My name is Colleen Hart. I raised a son who broke me and a daughter who saved me. And I am not ashamed to say, the road back to myself was paved with betrayal. But I walk it proudly." The applause was thunderous, and in the crowd I saw Sophie, tears streaming hand over heart. Later at the reception, a young woman approached me, late 20s maybe, fierce eyes. "You don't know me," she said, "but I'm one of the lawyers who helped build Justin's case against you." I didn't know the full story then. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated. "If you ever need a legal team for her ledger, I'd be honored to help." I handed her a card. Maybe not everyone from Justin's world was lost. That night, Sophie and I walked back to the hotel arm in arm. She whispered, "You know, I'm kinda glad you overheard me that day." I laughed. "That makes one of us." "No," she said. "Seriously? If you hadn't heard me at my worst, we never would have gotten to our best." And for the first time in a long time, I realized she was right. Sometimes the worst moments aren't where the story ends. They're where the truth begins. The next few months unfolded like a tapestry stitched with purpose, healing, and a kind of joy I hadn't thought possible after so much rupture. Her ledger wasn't just a podcast anymore. It was becoming a movement. We launched a community fund called the Second Bloom Grant, offering $5,000 microgrants to women over 50 who were starting over, escaping financial abuse, launching small businesses returning to school. We got more applications than we ever dreamed with stories that echoed mine, but also added colors I never imagined. It felt like standing in a garden of resilience, some blooming in defiance, others in quiet grace. One applicant, Denise, wrote, "I'm 61. My ex-husband drained our joint account after I paid off his cancer treatments. Said I was too old to rebuild. But I'm taking courses now. I want to design children's books. Thank you for reminding me it's not too late." Sophie read it aloud with tears. "Mom, she's you." But it wasn't just me. It was us. All of us who had given everything and been told we were too much or not enough. All of us who had loved beyond reason only to be cast aside. Around that time, a woman named Sharon reached out. She was a producer at a popular daytime show hosted by a famous TV psychologist. They wanted me and Sophie to appear. Sophie was hesitant. "It's performative." "True," I said, "but sometimes performative things make real people listen." We went. The set was glossy, the lights hot. But I sat straight in my chair and spoke truth like it was air. I cooked. I cleaned. I sacrificed. I nursed a man back to health who later said I wasn't good enough for his wedding guest list. And I let it destroy me until I realized it didn't have to. Sophie added, "We're not here because we were hurt. We're here because we healed." Loudly. The audience applauded. The segment aired. The inbox exploded. More letters. More stories. More proof that the invisible army of women like me was finally stepping out of the shadows. Then one afternoon, a certified letter arrived. From Justin. I didn't open it for hours. It sat on my kitchen counter like a coiled snake buzzing with the past. Finally, I peeled it open. It was formal stilted. Something about a foundation he was building. An apology donation in my name. A check attached for $21,000. Sophie read it and scoffed. "What is this hush money?" I didn't answer immediately. I stared at the check. It felt hollow. He hadn't called. Hadn't written a real letter. No acknowledgement of the damage. Just money. Again. I took the check to my desk, folded it, and placed it inside a copy of our first grant application. Then I mailed it anonymously to Denise. She could use a new laptop. Later, I sent Justin a postcard. No return address. Just 5 words. "I built more without you." I didn't expect a reply. I didn't want one. And still that night, I lay awake thinking about him. Was he happy? Was he haunted? Was he ashamed? And then, like a voice from deep inside me whispered, "It doesn't matter anymore." The next morning, I went for a walk. The air was brisk, the kind that makes your breath feel earned. At the park, a woman waved me down. Late 40s, maybe. Blonde hair, kind eyes. She looked nervous. "Are you Colleen Hart?" I smiled. "I am." She introduced herself, Melissa. Said she'd been listening to her ledger since episode 2. That she left her job in finance after her boss sexually harassed her. That her own daughter had tried to guilt her into co-signing a loan she didn't want. That our podcast made her say no. "I thought being a good mother meant giving until I disappeared," she said. "You taught me it's okay to draw a line." We hugged. When I got home, I found Sophie on the porch, laptop in her lap, sunlight bouncing off her hair. "I've been thinking," she said. "Oh," I teased. "No," she laughed. "It's good. What if we did a retreat? 3 days, women over 50 only. Stories, yoga, art, therapy, financial empowerment, workshops. We could call it the Unforgotten Weekend." I stared at her amazed. "You're a damn force, you know that." "So are you," she said, and I believed her. Later that evening, we began the planning. I texted a few of our listeners. By the end of the week, we had 60 RSVPs. The retreat would be held at a quiet lake house we rented through a friend. There'd be bonfires, open mic nights, letters burned and letters written. And when it was over, no one would leave empty. On opening night, I stood before those women, some with silver braids, others with tired eyes, all glowing with the sacred exhaustion of lives fully lived. "My name is Colleen," I began, "and I once gave everything I had to people who didn't know what to do with it. But I'm still here, and so are you." They stood and clapped. Then one by one they spoke. It wasn't therapy. It was witnessing, not fixing each other but refusing to look away. And as the fire cracked behind us, I knew that even though my daughter once betrayed me, she was now the one helping me rebuild the temple of my worth. The retreat lasted 3 days, but it felt like a lifetime stretched out into something tender and infinite. There was Donna, who shared how she'd once mortgaged her house to keep her son's startup afloat, only to be ghosted when it folded. There was Lila, whose daughter got married without telling her. They said the ceremony was for friends only. I watched it through an Instagram story, and there was Ruth, 74, who'd been financially supporting her ex-husband's adult child for years until she ended up couch surfing at her niece's place. We burned letters the second night. Each woman read a line aloud, then tossed her letter into the fire. Watching the embers dance, I thought, this is the sound of unburdening. Sophie and I sat in silence long after the flames died down. She whispered, "Mom, if I ever make you feel that kind of grief, I want you to leave. I want you to walk out and never look back." I turned to her. "If you ever hurt me, Sophie, I hope I remember to stay, but not out of duty, out of the belief that we're worth fighting through the fire." She nodded. I think that night we forgave each other again for the big things, the small things, and everything unsaid in between. When the retreat ended, I walked each woman to her car. Some hugged me like sisters. Some wept. Some just held my hands. They all said the same thing. "You made me feel seen." And it struck me this wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about taking back the narrative, holding the pen again, rewriting not just the ending but the beginning too. Because what no one tells you is this: betrayal doesn't just steal your trust, it steals your timeline. You begin to question your memories. Did I imagine the love? Was the tenderness real? Did I ever matter at all? And rebuilding your story from the ashes is one of the bravest things you'll ever do. After the retreat, Sophie and I launched a limited video series. The Ledger Speaks. Interviews with women who attended. Stories of betrayal turned into boundaries. Pain turned into policy. It went viral. One woman, Elena, said in her episode, "My son said I was a burden. I stopped paying his rent the next day." The silence that followed was deafening, but for the first time it felt like peace. That clip alone got over 1 million views. Then came the sponsors: ethical fashion brands, counseling platforms, even a legacy wealth planning firm run by women. Suddenly we weren't just telling stories, we were changing lives. We set up a scholarship fund. We hired a lawyer to create template documents. Power of attorney wills, exit plans for women in financial traps. And then one morning my phone rang. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Colleen?" the voice asked. It was Justin. I stepped outside, heart pounding like a drum. I saw your podcast," he said, voice shaky. "And the retreat. I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything, but I had to try." I waited. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to thank you. You saved my life once and I acted like it meant nothing. It did. It meant everything." Silence. "I wish I could fix it," he added. I let out a slow breath. My hands were trembling, but my voice steady. "You can't fix it, Justin, but you can learn from it and never treat another woman like that again." "I promise," he said. And for the first time in years, I believed him. Not because he sounded sincere, but because I no longer needed anything from him. Not approval, not money, not closure. That was the freedom I'd been building brick by brick. After I hung up, I sat on the porch for a long time. The wind was soft that day, warm enough to feel like spring. I closed my eyes, remembering the woman I used to be, shriveled by sacrifice, swallowed by silence. Then I opened them again and saw Sophie in the garden, barefoot, humming. She looked up and smiled. And in that moment, I realized something extraordinary. I had raised a woman who helped me re-raise myself. Later that week, a publishing house reached out. They wanted to turn her ledger into a book. Essays, reflections, maybe even submissions from our listeners. I hesitated at first. What if it diluted the truth? But then Sophie said something I'll never forget. "Mom, this isn't just your story anymore. It's a lighthouse." So I said yes. We called it "The Ledger That Saved Me." And on the dedication page I wrote, For the women who were always enough but finally believe it. A few weeks after that call with Justin, something strange happened. I got a letter. Not an email, not a text. A letter. Handwritten in shaky script addressed in a navy blue envelope I recognized instantly. My mother's handwriting. We hadn't spoken in nearly 12 years. She'd never approved of how I raised my kids. Too soft, she'd say. You spoil them. They'll never respect you. I had spent years trying not to become her, and years accidentally becoming her anyway. But the letter didn't contain any blame. No demands. No guilt trips. Just this. Colleen, I saw your face on television. The interview with that lady on the morning show. You looked strong. Like you had finally come home to yourself. I'm sorry for the things I said. I think I was just scared. Of you becoming more than me. I'm proud of you now. Love. Mom. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, the letter in my hands, untouched coffee growing cold beside me. It's strange, isn't it? How the words we long to hear our whole lives often come when we no longer need them. That was the moment I realized. I had rewritten more than just my story with Justin or Sophie. I'd rewritten the one with my mother too, because what I had always wanted from her, validation, respect, pride, I had already built within myself. The ripple effect didn't stop there. Our video series was picked up by a documentary team. They wanted to create a limited series about invisible matriarchs, older women erased from their families, erased from power, and then resurrected through truth. I met women who had been caretakers for their entire lives, of siblings, children, spouses, aging parents. Women who'd had whole lifetimes of giving and still managed to carry tenderness in their bones. One woman, Elena from Georgia, said something I still think about when I can't sleep. They'll never understand what it costs to be quiet. But I know now my softness wasn't weakness. It was sacred restraint. The series was called Saltwater Shoulders, a nod to the tears we carried for years, uncried, unvoiced. It won a regional Emmy. I didn't even know regional Emmys existed. But I remember standing on that stage, the lights hot on my face, Sophie beside me in a navy blue jumpsuit, and thinking, maybe this is what redemption looks like. Not fireworks, not apologies, just a microphone, a mirror, and the right to speak. The hardest part of all this wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the loneliness. It was the moment I stopped waiting for someone else to see my worth and started looking for it in myself. It meant burning old expectations. Letting go of the fantasy that one day Justin would show up with flowers and say, Mom, you were right, all along. It meant grieving the version of myself who gave until she disappeared, and then gently telling her, you can come back now, you're safe. There was one more letter I received. This one from a woman named Deb in Idaho. It arrived after our documentary aired. She wrote, I watched your story 3 times in one night. I'm 61. I've lived my entire life for other people. I'm selling my house and moving to Oregon. I'm going to write my own book. Thank you for reminding me that it's not too late to be my own main character. I framed that letter. It hangs in my office just above a photo of me and Sophie side by side, holding microphones, smiling at a crowd of women in folding chairs. And every time I look at it, I whisper the same prayer. Let the truth you speak reach the women still swallowing their pain. Let it crack them open in the best possible way. Let it remind them that survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. Because here's the real twist. I never got the $50,000 back. It went into taxes, contracts, and some silent buyout agreements I didn't care to untangle. But I never needed it. Because what I got instead was worth far more. A daughter who became my partner. A voice I didn't have to borrow anymore. And a life where I finally stopped apologizing for wanting more. That winter, Sophie and I launched our nonprofit, Her Voice First. Grants for mothers cut off by their children. Emergency housing for women fleeing financial abuse. Workshops on intergenerational trauma, forgiveness, and estate protection. I taught a session called Love Them Deeply, but Never Forget Yourself. And when I looked out into that sea of silver hair and weary eyes, I knew I was no longer just a woman who had been betrayed. I was a woman who had come back from it, not bitter, not broken, but blazing. Sophie and I stood at the airport arrivals gate, arms full of roses, waiting for the last person I thought I'd ever see again. My ex-husband, Richard. He had emailed me 3 weeks earlier, short and formal. "Colleen, I heard what happened. I saw the documentary. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. I've been doing some reflecting." It took me a week to respond. Not because I was angry I had let that go years ago, but because I wasn't sure if I had space for more ghosts in my life. But something in his words, I don't know. It felt less like an invitation and more like a closure waiting to happen. So I said yes. When he stepped into the terminal, slightly stooped from the years, eyes darting around nervously, my heart did a strange thing. It didn't race. It didn't ache. It simply settled. He spotted us, and I saw the moment his breath caught Sophie beside me, confident, whole, radiant. We hugged. It was brief, a little awkward, but real. At lunch that afternoon, he cleared his throat and said, "I never realized what I left you to carry." I didn't say anything. I just let the silence bloom between us. Sometimes silence is heavier than accusation. He continued, "You did everything, with no help. I saw the clips. Sophie told me more. And the truth is, I don't deserve to be sitting here. But I wanted to say thank you. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I was wrong. But thank you." It wasn't enough, but it was honest. And it struck me that Richard, in his own broken way, had done what Justin hadn't. He saw me. Not just as the woman he left, but as a person who rose. That night, Sophie and I sat by the fire pit outside my home. She toasted her glass of wine to the stars and said, "You know, if someone made this into a movie, people would call it unrealistic." I laughed. "Yeah," I said, "too many women getting their voices back. Hollywood wouldn't buy it." She leaned over and nudged me. "But we did. And we didn't need anyone to write it for us." The next week, I held the first book from our publishing imprint. A memoir by a 72-year-old woman named Ida, who'd been evicted from her daughter's house after cancer nearly wiped her out. The title, I Wasn't Dead Yet. It hit one in its category within a week. We had started something that wouldn't stop because the truth once spoken tends to echo. Our email inbox flooded with stories. Some heartbreaking, some infuriating, some beautiful in their rawness. One read, "My name is Terry. I watched your video after my son told me I was too dramatic for asking him to visit more than once a year. I packed my bags, moved to Santa Fe, and started painting again. Thank you for the push." One morning, I woke up to find Justin's name on my phone. A text. "Mom, I don't know if I deserve another chance, but I saw everything, and I'm sorry." No explanations, no excuses, just the bare bones of remorse. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, "I hope you mean it. Healing is not a door you walk back through. It's a new one we build together." He didn't respond for days. Then came a photo. Him standing at the gate of a retreat center for families and estranged parents in Maine. Caption, "I'm here. I'll stay as long as it takes." I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because my tears now had rules. I would not waste them on uncertainty again, but I was willing, just willing, to hope. That weekend, Sophie gave a TEDx talk. She titled it, "When Your Mother Teaches You What Courage Really Looks Like." She ended it by saying, she didn't raise her voice. She raised a standard. And I met it finally. I sat in the front row, hands clasped in my lap, trying not to dissolve. There on that red circle was my daughter, no longer a shadow, no longer playing a role, but a woman shaped by fire and now using that flame to guide others out of their own darkness. I think a lot about the $50,000, how it could have gone toward houses, cars, trust funds, how I once saw it as proof of love. But I know better now. Love that needs to be proven with money isn't love. It's leverage. The real currency was in these moments. A call from a forgotten husband. A letter from a mother who'd never said I'm proud. A daughter who turned pain into purpose. And a son, maybe, learning to look inward for the first time. That money, it bought nothing. But letting it go bought me everything. A few months later, I found myself standing in the middle of an unfamiliar room, staring at 50 women all seated in folding chairs arranged in a circle. Some held notebooks, some held coffee, but all of them held something heavier behind their eyes, unspoken stories. It was the first in-person workshop for our foundation's second flame. Sophie had the idea after Ida's memoir went viral. We need a place where women like Ida, and like you, can speak before they're silenced, she'd said. So we booked a church hall, printed some flyers, and sent out a call. Have you been dismissed, erased, forgotten? Come speak. Come write. The room filled. I stood in front of them, my palms sweating, trying to collect the words. My name is Colleen Marlowe, I began, and I was ready to give my daughter $50,000 every month until I heard what she really thought of me. Some of the women gasped. Some nodded. Some smiled, already familiar with my story. But then I added what broke me wasn't the money. It was realizing I had made myself smaller for people who didn't deserve the space. One by one, hands rose. A woman named Marcia shared how her son asked her to babysit full-time, then told people she was just lazy when she declined. Another, Lorraine, had signed her house over to her daughter, who promptly sold it without telling her. Each story was a shard of glass cutting clean through the room. But no one bled alone. I didn't lead with expertise. I didn't teach them anything they didn't already know. I simply witnessed them. That's what we all needed. Not saviors. Witnesses. That evening, Sophie and I went out for drinks to celebrate. She raised her glass and said, "To the women who were never too old to start over." I clinked her glass. "And to the daughters who finally figured it out before it was too late." She paused, then asked softly, "Do you think Justin ever will?" I didn't answer right away. "He's trying," I said finally. "And I'm not keeping score anymore. But I'll never be that woman again. The one who trades her dignity for a seat at his table." She nodded, eyes glassy. "You shouldn't be." It hit me then that healing doesn't look like reconciliation. It looks like boundaries. It looks like peace in your own home. It looks like waking up without waiting for someone else to call. Later that week, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. Me in my mid-30s holding baby Justin on my hip, flour on my nose from baking. Sophie stood beside me, grinning, a handprint in paint on her shirt. And on the back, in scrawled handwriting, "I'm sorry for forgetting what you looked like when you were still magic to us." It was signed J. No phone call followed. No apology tour. Just that image. And I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, the photo in my lap, a candle flickering on the counter beside me. Sometimes the smallest gestures come with the biggest shifts. It didn't fix anything, but it told me that somewhere out there he was piecing the mirror back together. In early spring, Sophie and I co-authored our first book, titled Bitter No More, Stories from Women Who Rose. It featured 10 narratives from women in our workshops, their names, their rage, their victories. We debated for days about the title. I was hesitant. I don't want people thinking we're just angry. But we were, Sophie insisted. And then we transformed it. That's the point. She was right. Anger isn't the enemy. It's the match. What you do with it? That's the story. At the book launch, I watched one of our featured women, Nancy, speak on stage. She said, "I spent 30 years convincing my family I was happy. I spent 1 year convincing myself I didn't need them to be. Guess which one finally worked?" The crowd laughed, then teared up. Afterward, a young woman no older than 25 approached me and said, "My mom always said I'd understand her one day. I think I just did." And that was the full circle moment I didn't know I needed. We weren't just healing our generation. We were sending out signals to the ones still watching, still learning. I don't know what legacy means anymore. It used to be money, assets, trusts. Now, it's this. A woman in Ohio who quit caring for her ungrateful son and opened a bakery. A widow in Arizona who sold her house, bought a van, and started painting desert landscapes. An ex-nurse in Oregon who finally published the book her family laughed at for decades. And me, Colleen Marlowe. Former homemaker, former doormat, and now something else entirely. Not a martyr, not a victim, but a witness to her own rebirth. I never imagined I'd live this version of life. Not because it's grand or flashy, but because it's mine. Years ago, my identity was woven into casseroles, clean baseboards, and family calendars. I lived in service of others. I measured my worth by how little I asked for and how much I gave. But here in my small, sunlit apartment, surrounded by books and coffee cups with lipstick stains, I live in service of something else now. Myself. It was a Tuesday morning when Amelia called again. I let it ring. I didn't pick up. There was no longer a panic in me to repair. No ache to explain. I had done all I could. I had given all I had, and I had overheard her say, not in a moment of anger, but in calculation, that I was just a tool for her lifestyle. A resource, not a mother. Some things can't be unheard. Forgiveness is not amnesia. It's just a choice not to bleed forever. I poured myself a coffee and opened my email. One message stood out. "Hi Colleen, I'm writing from the New York Times. We'd love to interview you for an upcoming feature on late life reinventions. Your work with Second Flame has sparked real interest." I laughed. The woman who once begged for a birthday text was now being asked to speak to the country. Not to prove anything, but to tell the truth. The whole raw, beautiful truth. That it's never too late to draw a new line. Later that day, I walked through the park with Sophie. We stopped to watch a group of teenagers filming something for TikTok, laughing, swaying, carefree. "They look so unburdened," I said. She nodded. "They haven't yet learned to disappear for others." I turned to her. "And they might not, if we tell these stories loud enough." She smiled. "Then we keep telling them." We reached the fountain and sat on the bench that had once upon a time held a version of me I no longer recognized. She had just overheard her daughter's betrayal. She had just seen 50 grand burn away in a matter of seconds, not because it was taken, but because it was never earned. She had just begun to question, if they don't see me, do I even exist? And now she knows. I exist more than ever. As the sun dipped below the trees, I pulled a folded letter from my bag. It was one I'd written to myself the day after Amelia's phone call. "Dear Colleen, you are not a transaction. You are not a favor owed. You are not defined by what you once gave. You are what you reclaim. And today, you reclaim yourself." I looked out at the sky, pink and golden, like it had somewhere better to be, and I whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to everything that hurt, to everything that changed me, to everything that made sure I woke up, alive, awake, unapologetically seen. Some stories begin with betrayal. Mine began with a voice I wasn't supposed to hear, a truth I wasn't meant to find. It tore through me like glass, not because it was cruel, but because it confirmed the quiet I had been ignoring for years. I was a fixture in Amelia's life, not a force. A supporting role in her perfect narrative, handed cash and tasks, never gratitude. But here's what betrayal forgets. Mothers are not infinite. We give, yes. We forgive often. But we also remember. And when we finally do, we rise. Not to punish. To protect. Not to beg. To rebuild. The truth is, I still love my daughter. Love doesn't always die with disappointment. But I no longer live in the rooms where I'm treated like wallpaper. Instead, I've filled my world with color again. And if you've ever been made to feel small, silent, or conditional, know this. You are allowed to rewrite the ending. Not all apologies come in words. Not all healing comes with hugs. Sometimes it comes with boundaries. Sometimes it comes with peace. And sometimes it comes with a quiet sunrise and your own name on a new chapter. You've been listening to Grace's Truth. And the whispers, they've only just begun.